Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's exclusive webinar on combating burnout and building a resilient workforce. And let me tell you, this could not come at a better time for myself. I am in desperate need for this session. My name is Christina, and I am an operations consultant with Myosh, and I will be your host for this session. Now, before we dive in, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We have a very exciting session lined up featuring two remarkable experts who are here to share their insights on managing stress, preventing burnout, and fostering resilience in the workplace. Now, allow me to introduce to you Greg Stark, the director and founder of BetterBeing. Greg has extensive experience in the workplace wellbeing and has been a pioneer in promoting employee health and productivity. His work with BetterBeing has helped numerous organisations enhance their workforce's overall wellbeing. Joining Greg is the beautiful Dr. Natalie Flatt, a renowned psychologist and co-founder of Connect Psych Services. Dr. Flatt has dedicated her career to understanding the psychological aspects of stress and resilience, and her insights have been invaluable in shaping effective mental health strategies in the workplace. During today's webinar, we will cover key topics such as understanding stress and its impact on performance, identifying signs and symptoms of burnout and strategies to mitigate it, the crucial role of recovery and sleep in building resilience, practical insights from BetterBeing's 2023 Wellbeing Index Report, and the role of leadership in promoting and supporting employee wellbeing. Now, just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared with you after this session. So if you miss out or if you have to duck out, not a problem. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A or chat box and we'll throw to them throughout the session. We highly encourage you all to take notes and participate actively to get the most out of this webinar. And I know we're all going to get a lot out of it. So it's very exciting. Now, without further ado, let's begin and let's welcome Greg Stark and Dr. Natalie.
Thanks so much for that. That was such a nice introduction, wasn't it, Greg? You're on mute.
That was a fabulous introduction. Thanks, Christina, and thank you everyone for joining. We are very excited.
Now, hype him up too much.
It's definitely big shoes to fill. Big shoes to fill today, but I think as we've spoken about off air, it's very timely. A lot of people are wanting this information. We're seeing a lot of it out there at the moment, but I thought we'd start today just with a bit of a more light-hearted story about my late great Uncle Jim. Uncle Jim was a man who was very influential on my life. He came from very humble beginnings. Sadly, I lost him a couple of years ago, but he came from very humble beginnings, worked his way up through the corporate world and became CFO of a large mining company. He retired in his 50s, which is really nice for some, but you know, when I used to catch up with him, he used to say to me all the time that he wouldn't survive in today's working world. And with my curiosity, I'd say to Uncle Jim, why is it that you don't think you would survive in today's working world? And with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, because he was one of the great wind-up merchants, he would say to me, because I couldn't smoke. And every inch of my health professional body wanted to tell him all the reasons why smoking was really bad for our health. But when I really stopped to think about what it was that he was saying, he was right. Because everything about smoking is good for your health, except for the cigarette. Because when Uncle Jim was working in the office, if he was in a high-stress, high-pressure environment, he would often pull out his packet of cigarettes and take some really deep breaths, give himself some time to respond to whatever the situation might be. Then as the office workplace changed, you could no longer smoke inside, meant that he would have to get up from his desk, he would go outside and he would stand outside, maybe chat to a colleague, talk about whatever was bothering him that day, get the latest office gossip, and then head back up to his desk and continue working on whatever he was working on. Only to repeat that process every few hours as those nicotine cravings kicked in. Now, not that I'm advocating for smoking, that is not the point of sharing this story, but I think a lot of those behaviours within the workplace have changed. We're in a very different working world these days, but there is still the constant stress and pressure that we all feel. And I think particularly at the moment, we're feeling it more than ever. So today, myself and Nat are going to chat to you about the things that we can do as a workplace to improve outcomes for organisations and for teams, and also at individual levels. How can we support people and empowering them to feel like they have more control when it comes to their stress? As Christina mentioned, we want to keep today really interactive. We want to hear from you and hear from the challenges that you're facing, that hopefully we can work with you to problem solve those as we go through today. So I guess the first thing I'd encourage you to do, there might be a little poll that comes up, answer the polls as they come up. But in the comments section, I would like you to share, what do you see as the biggest challenge for your workplace when it comes to this topic around stress and burnout right now? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section, and Christina will throw those to me throughout the course of today. While we're waiting for those to come through, without any further ado, lovely to introduce to you the fabulous Dr. Natalie Flatt, who is an absolute superstar in this space. We love catching up and talking about these stuff all the time, and now we get to do it in front of an audience. But I'd love to hand over to Natalie to tell us a little bit more about yourself, and I guess what you're seeing out there as some of the challenges for businesses right now.
Thanks, Greg. And I think we do. We love our chats. And, you know, I love your Uncle Jim story. I've heard it a couple of times, you know, when you're out and about in festivals as well. And it resonates with me because it's such an important aspect around the connection, but also around just the pause and reflect. And I don't think that we do that enough nowadays, and it's got worse. So I'm Nat. Please, that's refer to me as Nat today. But I'm the co-founder and the director of Connect Psych Services, and what we've done is we've created an innovative EAP platform that matches best fit practitioner to suit the needs of the employees. We work with real-time data, also with workplaces. It's all de-identified, of course, but being able to work with the leaders and the HR leads on what we're actually seeing on our end. And you know, we look at burnout. It goes anxiety, stress, burnout. Burnout being the third reason as to what the utilization is on our end, and what employees are actually needing. We also conduct a lot of thematic analysis. So our practitioners are actually provide some information back to us to say, well, what are you actually seeing that potentially might be underneath those reasons that employees are seeking support? And we'll talk about this later, but it does come around self-priority and also self-compassion. So you can start to see that this might be shaping a bit of the culture of what their experiences are when they're in the workplace. So these data insights, and they're so important to myself and our team, because what we try to create is not only that upstream data capturing, but then also what we can do about it. So the awareness, but then the action. And we try to create actions as not being a scary word. Actions can be really easy, and we can start with some basic, the 1%ers, and those 1%ers we can then build on. And when we can start to build on that and to gain that control back, which is sometimes what stress and anxiety takes away from us, we're able to kind of start to flip that bad stress into the more good stress, or into the more green levels of stress there. So that's my passion. I'm also, people like to call me a massive data nerd as I sit here with my glasses on, because age is getting the better of me. And it's, we work with data, but, we also then work with what employees are saying. So it's really important to create that level of psychological safety within workplaces, so people have the opportunity and the confidence to speak up, to say, hey, something's not right for me, or something's not right for the team. And can we look at other ways to do things? Because that's what it's all about. Really great work design, really great leadership, really great psychological safety is going to bring about that mental fitness, but within our workplaces, and then the workplace productivity and performance starts to rise as well.
I have some answers to your question, Greg. What is the biggest challenge you face? Do you want me to share some?
That would be fantastic. Thanks, Christina.
So we had just over 50% of people that are joining us today respond, which is awesome. So thank you, everybody, so far. A few of the answers: long hours and not spending enough time to support the family, getting people involved, coping with the daily demands of the workplace and interaction with others, fast-paced environment with limited downtime to catch up on items. Guilty. Constantly hearing staff are tired. That would be hard. And a few more. I'll just do a few quick. Lack of change management. That would be very difficult. Understanding how widespread this is in the organisation. And yes, this is a huge one. Different levels of stress and tolerance to stress in the team. And the all-important work-life balance. That's just a few. I'll obviously send these out to everybody. Oh, and one other one that's just popped up in the chat. When I leave and go to because when I leave and go to room, they will still call anytime, so I end up working long hours. So that's obviously a boundary. Like, there's no boundaries. It's just a constantly on feeling.
I'm going to need a big whiteboard, but this is great. I like writing these things down as I hear them so that we can refer to them later. But thank you so much, Christina, and thank you to all of you for keeping this so interactive throughout the course of today as well. And Nat, thank you for your introduction as well. There was a lot of great themes that I've touched on there that we're seeing at the moment. Even that last one that came through, disconnection. You know, even during COVID with the hybrid working, you know, people gained an hour or so in their day because they didn't have to commute, but they're actually using that time to work longer hours. They're working longer hours. That ability to disconnect has been more challenging than ever before. You know, a lot of these things we are going to touch on a bit later around the different levels of stress and how we can account for that and adapt to that. People are tired. There's a lot going on in the world. There's conflict in the world. There's financial pressures going on. I think that one of the big things that I'm hearing a lot at the moment is companies are having budgets tightened and are being asked to do more with less. And obviously that puts more demand on everyone. And I guess when it comes to this area is how can we maximise the impact of our spends to really create impact and change and get that engagement, I think was the other big theme in there. So hopefully throughout today, we will touch on all of those. If there's other things that come up, I encourage you to keep it as interactive as possible and put them in there as we go and not just wait to the end for the questions. But I guess a bit about me. My name is Greg Stark, founder and director of BetterBeing. I actually started my career working with elite athletes in high performance sport, and then found the opportunity to take those same principles of what we do with athletes to keep them at their peak so that they can perform their best into the corporate world, into your world, in terms of how do we apply those same principles. And our principles are based on mindset, movement, nutrition, recovery. And if we get individuals really focusing on those things that they can control, how it improves health outcomes for them over time. And we do that in a really engaging way, in a way that people want to hear those messages and hopefully inspires them to change their behaviour. And that's what we really focus in on at BetterBeing. I guess to start off with, along the lines of stress, I'm going to ask you two questions. First one being, in the last 12 months, how much stress, and again, I'm not asking you to share this, I just want you to take a moment to reflect. How much stress have you experienced on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being the absolute most amount of stress that you could ever imagine in your life, 1 being no stress whatsoever. Where would that number sit? The second question I'm going to ask you is only a yes or no answer. There's no grey, there's no in between. Is stress bad for your health? Yes or no? And again, no need to share these. I just want you to reflect these for yourself. Because this was a study that was done in the US. They looked at 30,000 people over the course of 8 years and looked at the health outcomes in these people. Now, no surprise here, the people that reported high amounts of stress and saw stress as bad for their health had the worst health outcomes. They had a 43% risk of premature death. But what was most interesting, that I find most fascinating about this particular study, was that those that had the best outcome when it came to their health and longevity and quality of life was those that had high stress but perceived it as something good for our health. Now, again, today we're going to talk into a lot of the negative parts of stress as well, but I guess what we want to do is challenge some of your thoughts and your thinking about stress being the demon, that stress is bad, because there is a lot of benefits of how stress can help us have better health, quality of life, helps us to perform and provides a lot of benefits. But if we demonize stress and make it the enemy, that's where we start to make it toxic. You know, and stress is inevitable, but I guess the biggest outcome that we want is how do we have stress in a way that is sustainable to human performance? That people can live long, fulfilling, happy lives, and stress be a big part of that. We're not looking to eliminate stress altogether.
You're flipping the script on how stress is perceived.
Correct, yes. Yeah, and again, we're going to contextualise a lot of these things because, again, there is negative aspects to stress as well, which is probably a lovely segue. Nat?
Yeah.
Talk to us about, I guess, the differences there between when stress, becomes bad, we head into anxiety and burnout. How do we notice these things in ourselves? How do we notice these things in others? And how do we deal with those along the way?
Yeah. I just want to, I'll reflect just on exactly what you've got your notes behind there, Greg, as well, about, that why it is so tough for individuals. And, really looking at, we knew that there was going to be a mental health tsunami after COVID because we were in so much of the survival state. So a lot of stress now, upon reflection, is the cause of how we're actually having to, I don't like to use the word, but that pivoting in that time. And we're actually starting to see the consequences of that on our body. And Greg, you summed that up nicely from a physiological perspective. There is a huge component of stress. I can now touch base on that emotional component and also that behavioral component, because I think someone said very nicely, Christina, is that their reaction, the differences between the reaction to stress within workers. And we all have different reactions based on our emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, let's start at the, I'm with you, Greg. We don't want to make this a negative webinar. We really want to be flipping that more to the positive and the opportunities. But I will start in the red and finish in the green, because that's, I'm that optimistic personality anyway there. But look, where we said, as I said before, 70% of our clients are displaying signs of burnout, and really, looking at that. What is that burnout? And that's that definition of, that emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. And that's caused by this prolonged and excessive stress. And that's often related to work. So we see this as a workplace occupational hazard, dare we say. So from a physical component, we can see that chronic fatigue. So it's people saying that they're hearing that I'm constantly tired. Now, adding to that, hearing it, when we can hear it and when we can see it within workplaces, it can develop a stress contagion. So for people that might actually feel, and I'm pretty sure that our audience feels this, they might come in as a 2 out of 10 on their stress today, but they're sitting next to someone that might be an 8 out of 10. Now, how do they, if we could, self-check in all day, how do they feel potentially even an hour or 2 hours later after being in that area of that individual that showing a high level of stress? People actually report that they feel a high level of stress based on this, I suppose, osmosis.
The energy.
the energy. Yeah. So that feeling of tiredness, and you said, oh, that's hard to hear all the time. It is actually hard to hear when we've got colleagues or leaders that continually are saying that. So, bringing onto that chronic fatigue, which we see is that insomnia. And I know, Greg, you'll be touching on the importance of sleep soon, but it starts to, when we're continually in this phase where we're so tired, and because we've got this element of chronic stress, it's much harder for us to shut down that central nervous system at the end of the day. Our body is continually in that fight or flight, and the adrenal can be working overtime. But that's where the adrenaline can start to cause havoc and start to create those psychosomatic symptoms of the headaches. We can start to see more frequent illnesses because our immunity is starting to break down. And that's where we can start to see a lot of muscle pain and muscle joints. And it's really because some really vital minerals in our bodies, such as magnesium, are really drying up because stress likes to suck that up. And that's what can cause us even those cramps, even at night, is because of the lack of magnesium in our body. But emotional stress, which is what we see within burnout, is that real sense of failure, that self-doubt that you can actually achieve anything or you are achieving anything. And that can start to create this area within the mindset of employees and teams that we're not achieving anything and we're continually failing. And that's where people can feel very defeated, very trapped. They can start to question whether they're in the right position. And they don't know whether or not they can continue to do this day in, day out. So it is a real challenge for a lot of employees and employers right now on being able to combat these feelings of burnout, because the behavioral aspect is the pulling back. They want to withdraw. And we can see this. And when we start to see this level of isolation and the social isolation, we're trying so hard, especially within the hybrid workplace setting, which it was a little bit, it's becoming like a pendulum, and we're trying to still find the sweet spot of what's some great days to be in the office to work together and what's some days where we can have that more so that balance. Have we got it all right? Workplaces are all different. Teams are all different. We haven't really got the sweet spot yet. But the isolating from even those social events or those connections within your workers is a big sign. And that's something that employees that are feeling those burnout symptoms are going to show, as they're going to pull right back there. And then we can also see the procrastination start to come up too. The loss of motivation is also very evident, again, against projects. So, if we can then start to kind of move, as I said, I'm moving like into the greener area, but look, we can look at the anxiety. So where does before burnout, we can start to see some signs of anxiety in individuals. And the anxiety is more that feeling of worry, that feeling of nervousness or apprehension that something is going to happen today, but they don't know what. And so they have this level of unpredictability, and they've got the adrenaline and the fight or flight is sitting there. It's sitting underneath, and it can be triggered. We're waiting with trepidation on something bad happening, because anxiety will always tell us, hey, there's a threatening situation coming up. Do I run, or do I stay and fight, or am I going to freeze? So we have these moments where we don't really know what to do and how we're going to react. Now, the area of anxiety and, not knowing what's to come, again, is that behavioral avoidance. So avoidance in certain situations which feel unpredictable or have had a bad, that there might have been, that might have created a bad situation once, and they're believing that might create that situation again. So they'll try and avoid those areas. It can also then lead into some more compulsive or obsessive compulsive behavior styles, to be able, because what a person's trying to do is trying to grip onto that control. So they're trying to control their situation, and being able to have things in order or have things being at a certain time or in a certain way is their element of control, to again control what they believe is an unpredictable environment. And Individuals with anxiety, they can lose their confidence, and they can continually look for some reassurance. Am I doing this right? Have I got this right? Those what if questions. What if I haven't got those right? What are going to be the consequences there? And so that can then allow them to not so much more so procrastinate, but not be able to take the risks or make those decisions that they maybe once were able to do, or that workplaces are potentially relying on them to do as well. So this is, it can feel very overwhelming for many individuals that have got those symptoms of anxiety. And it can then start to really take over their levels of concentration. When we can feel ourselves in this fight or flight, our limbic system is firing on all elements, and it starts to the blood flow starts to become less at the prefrontal lobe. And the prefrontal lobe is where we start to where all our organization and our memory and also our self-regulation occurs. So when our brain's saying, no, focus so much on the limbic system, this is where we need to get out of this situation that we do or don't know is going to happen, it starts to then affect the other areas that could have those more problem-solving abilities. So we kind of find ourselves in a bit of a rut there. But the physical, physical anxiety can be it can be quite obvious. So we can have the restlessness, we can feel our heartbeat, and sweating, and we have these physiological symptoms. We can start to do some shallow breathing, which can then cause those levels of dizziness within us, and that can even start to induce a panic attack because we're starting to work ourselves up. Moving more over into the yellow area where we're looking at, say, bad stress, and really that, that I suppose that differentiating is that anxiety is characterized by that persistent and the excessive worry, where stress is a real broad response to a demanding situation. And, so from a physical aspect, again, we can see stress really show from a physiological symptoms very much the same, because it still is that, and the adrenaline kind of style, but more in those short, sharp bursts, where we can then get the headaches and the muscle tensions. We can get the fatigue again, and also the sleep disturbances. Many of the clients that I've dealt with over the years, we've got the gastrointestinal issues, because the digestive system could be on overdrive, trying to be able to, break down our food as quickly as possible so we can feel a little bit lighter, or it can actually have the reverse effect there. So we can see both ends of the spectrum when it comes to digestion. But again, we can see that increased heart rate when we're put in these stressful situations. Now, from an emotional aspect, stress, because it can come on quite quickly, we're looking at people can show that anxiety. Okay, they can start to have that level of doubt, and those what if questions can start to come in. But we can also see that it brings out, stress can actually bring out elements of anger. And because the reason that we can see stressful, people responding to stress in a different way is because anxiety and anger actually have the same, can have the same behavioral or emotional output. That fight or flight response, as I was saying, is that some people, when they're stressed, they can go more so into the fight. So we can start to see the anger, we can start to see the levels of aggression, or even the mood swings start to occur. And when you're in a workplace environment, which at times can be very sensitive, that can actually cause real disruption and conflict amongst colleagues. Then when we can start to feel that we've got these anger outbursts and we don't know how to control them, and then the anxiety hits, and then we might become so overwhelmed we can break into tears, and we just not being, and because we're, again, the always on, and we've got to keep going, and we've got all these work demands, we don't actually have time to self-regulate. And when we are in those positions over and over and over again, we can start to again feel helpless. So these depressive signs can start to come in. Now, anxiety and depression, they have a high comorbidity rate. And when individuals are still in that stress or that anxiety state for a continued amount of time, it can start leading into that helplessness. And that's where we can start to see those depressive symptoms start to come. Behaviorally, we can see those changes in the appetite. As I said, with the gastrointestinal issues, we can see weight gain, or we can see weight reduction. A lot of the times when we're stressed, our cortisol can be really high, and even from like a sensory perspective, some people can then go out to crave high carb, high sugary foods. And we can go for them because that's what we feel we need to break through that fatigue, is that we'll go for those, those high sugar foods. And then, as we know, that especially with those ones that we can break down really easily, we can go up and then we can go down. So that's not the answer. That can actually exacerbate the issue there. Again, procrastination, because the stress is firing, this area of the brain is not so much firing. So we just feel a little bit stuck again. And people don't like the feeling of stress. Again, it feels like they're out of control. People like to numb it. So we can start to see areas of substance abuse starting to kick up. And that's not just, we're in, I'll admit it, we are that culture where we do like that wine to wind down. And that's great, socially fabulous, a great talk starter, we can do that. It's can have great connection, but it's when you start to become dependent and tolerant to it, then that's where it can start to potentially cause some other areas there of concern. And again, stress, when we can't voice our concern, when we don't even have the words, that can start to pull us back again socially. But as Greg said before, and I don't know what the poll was, Christina, I might take it back to you. How many actually stated that stress is good for you?
No one.
Oh, no one. Okay. Well, there you go.
Again, I've left that one for people to reflect by themselves.
Yeah, that was more an inner reflection, but I would have been surprised if anybody said it was good for them, until they heard what you're going through. I know personally, I was just thinking, Christ, you would have seen me nodding. I literally go through all 4 quadrants, and I'm just like, oh, I need to learn. What's the next bit? Help me learn.
Well, I'm gonna finish off this slide on a positive note, because I'm going to answer that question, that stress is good for you. Okay, just about how we manage the stress, and Greg and I will talk to you about some of those tips today. But look, it's called eustress. Okay, if anyone wants to know a new term today, good stress is called eustress, and it's motivating. It can be really motivating. We need an element of stress within our day to be able to organize ourselves, to be able to to get up and say, right, I've got A, B, C, D, E to do today. How am I going to do that? Which kind of area am I going to, where am I going to prioritize? Which task am I going to do today? Which task am I going to do maybe this morning, and then have a break, and then lunch, and then have a break, and then, afternoon, then, potentially have another break before I pack up and, close off my workstation and then do this. And it allows us to be able to organize our day to be able to continue to move. And once we can actually be able to master that and to leverage that stress into turning it into motivation, it actually does the reverse effect on our focus and our concentration, because we're able to work in short, sharp bursts on a project and have that full attention. But then we're going to allow ourselves, we're going to have that compassion to say, I'm taking a break. Okay? Right, before I go on to the next thing, I've got my task completion. I'm going to tick that off. Done. Move on. Right. Okay. I'm going to have my break. I'm going to recalibrate. And what am I going to do next? And so it's giving yourself permission to be able to take those breaks in and then to go on to the next task. And that's where that focus and that concentration is. But this is all elements of good stress. Physical adaptations. We don't. Greg can obviously talk to this far better than me. Within sports, they need to be pushed into a stressful situation, and to then come out of that to be able to recalibrate, to be able to better themselves the next time. So if we're not pushed to learn, and we don't put ourselves in these stressful situations, we don't know our limits. But once we know our limits, we can be pushed a little bit further, and then we come back and we recover. Well, the next time we can be pushed a little bit further. And that's the whole area of great performance and what we see within sport. They are under those pressure tested and the stressful responses. I also learned at our Aussie football rules as well, our AFL, our game, even the way the umpires are trained. They're trained in a sauna with an iPad doing like some problem-solving techniques with blaring music in heat. They actually get put under a stress chamber to be able to manage, what might be on the field, like everyone, and that actually really assists with their focus and their concentration. But mainly as well is that when we find ourselves in stressful situations and we have that ability to problem solve when we've got the right parameters and the protective layers around us, it can lead to fabulous innovation and creativity. We want to be pushed. We want to be challenged. We want to be able to think outside the box. That is actually a stress component.
No one grows in their comfort zone, do they?
Okay.
That whole thriving under stress. Like I always say, I thrive under pressure and I thrive in a stressed environment. But that's obviously exactly what you're just saying. It's flipping the script. Yeah.
And again, I think the biggest thing again that I was taking from that talk there, again, it's physiologically and psychologically, our bodies are intertwined in how we show these things, how we feel these things. What we do influences, the stress, and how we think influences stress. And but I think the biggest thing that I took from the difference between those states is our level of exposure. I think you mentioned it a few times, that short, sharp bursts, that when stress is relentless and it is constant, and I know some of the feedback was that always feeling like they're on the go, there's deadlines when we're juggling our personal life and our professional life. They sometimes feel like there's no reprieve. And it's about how do you create that space and putting structures in place as an individual and as a workplace to create those brain breaks or the stress breaks in the day to make performance more sustainable, so that we don't get to those red levels of burnout with increased, psychological and physical harm that happens there. And again, I think the other part was, that there might be real threat and perceived threat, but at the end of the day, it has the same impact on the body. So whether it's a saber-toothed tiger coming to get you, or the thought of a saber-toothed tiger coming to get you if you don't make your work deadline, the body will react in that same way. So again, I think that's probably one of the big things, is encouraging people to think about the way they think, to reflect on the way their thoughts are, and understand those things. Again, some of the big parts that I took out of there. I guess, with my background and where I've come from within sport, a big part of my role was to try and manage this within athletes. Because again, Nat spoke about it, there was questions about it, is how do we set workloads and training loads for people when we've got different capacities. So we might have a team of 30 athletes all doing the same sport, but they recover in different ways. They might have different things happening that affects their recovery and their ability to then perform in the following training or the following match. Now, again, a big part of that is actually understanding them at an individual level. So we might have set workloads that we want to achieve as a team within a certain training period, but we would always adapt those workloads based on individual circumstance. So one of the things that we would have athletes do every morning, they would come in, we would get them to complete a survey. It was a pretty comprehensive survey. It was about 3 pages. It would ask how their lifestyle's been, how do they feel physically, how do they feel emotionally. And what we were looking is subtle variations within their responses to that. And we would try to identify those that are fine to do a full training workload, those that might need to have a conversation to find out a bit more information and maybe moderate their workload, and identify those that might need to have the day off, have a session off, and have complete time away in order to recover. Because the mentality was, we're better to sacrifice a day than we are a week, a month, a longer period of time, because when people get to those stages of burnout or overtraining, how we want to refer to it, they're the outcomes that we see. And again, I think the other part that people spoke about is having low energy. Everyone's very tired at the moment. So the way we like to think about the exposure part of exposure to stress is that it very much depends at that individual level. that if we're in a state where we've got high energy and we feel great and we're in a high demand environment, we can perform really well and be in that part of eustress. But if we're in a state of low energy and depletion and we're put into a high demand environment, we might be able to perform in that for a little bit, but all those signs and symptoms of that tired, that feeling of worry, all those things will start to build up and performance drops away. Interestingly, there's also another state where we might have high energy and in a really low demand environment, and we can experience a thing called burnout, where we're under challenged, we're understimulated, and that can have a whole host of negative impacts and negative effects for us. But also having that time in that recovery phase, so that low energy, low demand time. And again, that comes back to what Nat was just talking about, is interspersing that time between trying to be in high performance and getting stuff done, and then having time where we're switching into that recovery mode. And again, if we look at it from a physiological perspective, high performance is, quite often in that sympathetic state, that flight or fight response, and then we want to go into that parasympathetic state and getting the balance throughout the day between those two parts. The challenge is understanding how do we do that at an individual level. With athletes, we had all the metrics in the world. We understood everything about how much distance they travelled, how much they slept. What we found most impactful at an individual level with the athlete was to simply ask, how do you feel? And I think within workplaces, and again, Nat spoke about, the role that leaders have in that part and managing the person and not just managing the work. In saying this, we don't want to just focus everything at the individual level, but there is lots that we can do from an organisational level. And there was some great research that came out earlier this year that if we focus everything on the individual level, it can have counterproductive impacts, that we need to have a holistic view of how we approach both the work design factors and the human factors. Love to hear from you in the comments section. What are some of the ways that you help to influence the work of your workers to help manage their stress? What are some of the structures, or even what are some of the questions that you might have in how you alter work design so it is more conducive to performance and less conducive to burnout, stress, overwhelm, anxiety? Why those answers are coming through in the comments, I'm just going to pass over to Nat to talk about some of the factors that, or levers as we like to refer to. What are some of the levers of what you can do as a workplace to make that stress more conducive to high performance and health?
Yeah, look, you got it on the, you hit it on the head, didn't you, with the work design, and I think I want to start in the green today now, and I want to look at my little your green lever and looking about that psychological safety, and that really is the umbrella, and being able to create that psychological safety, and it's also against psychosocial hazards, which is a huge movement within workplaces. And it's a good movement, and it doesn't need to best for your workers, and you also then want the best for yourselves, and you want the best for your workplace as a whole. I like to say that also that leaders are the cultural architects, and there has been that movement now where well-being is really starting to be highlighted, but it can't be perceived as optional. In reality, it does need to be perceived as foundational. So that's probably just the first thing before we start to create the work design. You want to have that authenticity behind what you are doing to support your workers as a leader. And we know, and we're going, Greg and I know that the definition of a leader has changed. It's changed over the last 4 years rapidly. It's not just so much about capability, but it's also about the people skills. And we can't expect leaders to have this knowledge. It's not fair on leaders to feel like they have to become those pseudo counselors at a certain time. So, this is where we need to be, really looking at our wellness and our training programs that are suited not only for our staff, the employees, but also support for the leaders, and then support for the teams as a whole. The word well-being washing, it's getting thrown around a lot. And it's true, because we want to be able to devise wellbeing programs that are going to be suited to your workers. It's not so much a wellbeing program should not now be that tick of the box. And again, what Greg said, it's really easy. Ask your employees, get together some groups, get together a little lunch and learn, get them to see what you're trying to achieve as a workplace and as an organization, and allow them to put their 2 cents into it, allow them to have that level of voice. That contributes to the psychological safety. It also contributes to change management. It also contributes to recognition, and it allows them to understand, what changes are going to be occurring in a positive way around supporting the well-being. Employee assistance programs, they're imperative, but it's about choosing the right program that's going to suit your workers. We're an online platform. We work very heavily in the male-dominant industries, and we do this for a number of reasons. And we work across all 19 industries, but it works for them because we are very flexible, 24/7, across the whole weekend availability. Your workplace might prefer face-to-face. So being able to even audit your EAP and having a look at the utilization rates and potentially as to why. And if you then did have any further questions, ask them to say, well, how else can you help me in this area? And that would go to the next step of normalizing these empathic conversations. This is where EAP and training can really pay off. Having that empathetic environment, it allows to really break down those barriers to support. It breaks down the fear and the stigma. And it just allows people, that ability to understand and know how to actively listen, because active listening is an amazing skill that I think everyone should learn and should have. It's not only fabulous for creation and innovation, but I'm very much that Simon Sinek style groupie, dare I say, where we have then leaders and have the ability to hear everyone out and then take that back and process all that information and come to that conclusion that really starts to incorporate everyone's opinions before putting your own opinion or before putting your own solution as a leader in. We don't have all the answers, and that's okay. We're not supposed to. But that empathic conversation, it brings you more to like that equal level as a person. Hey, sometimes stripping the label back and stripping the hierarchy back, it can have amazing benefits to trust, and again, building that psychological safety. But also is that when employees are saying, hey, I'm not doing okay, an empathic listener will actually already start to see some of those signs, or the employees will start to see some of those signs, because the baseline of an individual who might be showing the stress or the anxiety or the burnout symptoms that I went through before, they're going to be able to pick them up. They're going to be able to say, okay, now I know these signs. I'm working, Greg and I are working closely together, and Greg knows that I come in bouncing in every day. But over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've started to not, share that coffee with him every morning and talk about our day. Or every time I do talk to him, it's quite negative, or I am displaying that I'm continually tired. Now Greg knows that, hey, Nat might be showing some early signs of burnout, or, she's not coming after work and, catching up with the rest of them, what might be going on there. And those empathic conversations, it really does open the door in a neutral way to say, hey, I've noticed that, ... And are you okay? So, if you have that psychological safety built within the workplace, and then you can have those elements of those conversations, it's going to get to the challenge that employee is facing far quicker than if they just let it simmer and simmer and simmer, and before you know it, they've pulled out, or a mental health claim has occurred, or they're taking the mental health sick leave off. Creating that, we talk before about that hybrid workplace, and the hybrid workplace and the financial stress that workplaces are feeling, and people feeling like they're doing 2 jobs for one person, and that continual on demand. Don't we just all love our phones? The addiction of trying to still even look for emails after hours, or even having that leader that is about do as I say, not as I do mentality. That is also going to create a culture where it is poor work-life balance. And that is something that we at Connect Psych do a lot of work in with both employees and workplaces. But being able to create that culture of this is this is when we work in after hour emails, whether or not that they're not allowed. But if you're as a leader saying, I want you to switch off, then you've also got to show that you're going to switch off too. And that doesn't happen all the time. That's not realistic. We all get that demands can occur and projects can occur. But that is, again, where to be able to incorporate better work-life balance, better breaks in between, encouraging the lunch rooms, back to the water cooler conversations, which it creates amazing connectivity, back to wellbeing awards, back to walking group meetings. This has got those micro breaks throughout the working day that are acceptable, is going to start to create that little bit of Uncle Jim coming back, which has got huge benefits to even burnout symptoms. Research shows that even half an hour a day of being able to take these micro breaks, or these elements that are about me, right, can actually again be a protective layer to that burnout. But again, as Greg said, the employee autonomy can create amazing behavior change. That is giving employees back control about how they would like their week to look like. Now, again, it's the hybrid workplace, what is the best, how is it going to work? Every workplace, every industry is different. Okay, they've all got different work design. But being able to bring the employees into this as a collective solution is going to reap the best rewards for the employee and for the workplace, because it's bringing them that element of control that they feel like, hey, if I can control my environment, then I'm going to be able to flip some of that bad stress that I feel again into that good stress. And coaching about that, how you can do that is there. Like, the help is there to be able to create that area where employees can gain that autonomy and then be able to create those levels of best time management to improve the focus and the motivation throughout the day. So that does sound like a lot, but even starting off with one and trying to implement this within the workplace, you're going to see a significant change in people's energy and also just that cultural, but also you're moving into the right direction. Once you feel that all the staff have been able to grasp that, whether that's a new policy, procedure, ways of doing things, new EAP program, new training, new social aspect, then you can move on to the next stage there.
Yeah, again, I think people often overlook the simple things within that. And I think the biggest thing I've taken from everything you said there is that often people just want to feel heard. They want to feel like they are listened to, they're understood at an individual level, that active listening part, that ability to have control over their work. And again, the responsibility of leaders to, not do as I say, but not as I do, but to lead through example in their practices, I think are really, great, simple ways that workplaces can be designed. And again, I think a big part of that is we know workload in terms of how people feel about their workload is a huge part. Having those conversations on a regular basis, because day to day, week to week, month to month, people's capacity for workload can change. And so keeping, regular open communication that way can really help to adjust through there. Christina, just quickly, I am conscious of time. What's been coming through in the chat section in regards to work design strategies?
Yeah, quite a few. I will just, in response to what you've just said, I find as well, like just speaking from my own experience, it all just comes down to basic communication. Like, we just need to get back to basics, exactly like what you said. How are you feeling? we spoke offline, we all use Teams, Microsoft Teams. And I know at 1 o'clock every day, I get a message from Microsoft saying, just checking in, how are you feeling? And you can literally reply to that and it'll take you to a whole list of things based on your answer. And it's little simple things like that that you could implement in your workplace that could even just do a basic little health check on yourself. And on the flip side, with leadership, to play devil's advocate here, I often find that it's our leaders, in my experience, that are coming to me saying, we're worried about burnout. We're worried about burnout. You need to switch off. You need to switch off. You need to find a better work-life balance. And sometimes it's not necessarily the leaders that need to do that or that need to encourage that. It's the people that are actually working that need to say, oh, Christ, I need to stop. It's okay to stop for a bit. It's okay. Like, if you're someone like myself who's just constantly trying to people please and do all the things and help as much as you can, you need to take on the advice of the leaders. And it's not always the people trying to tell the leaders that they need to stop. It can be both, come from both.
The thing that you just said there, Christina, because you just reminded me that, the women are more likely to burn out, but it's also women that are really wedded to their job. And love their job and have that passion behind the job. And burnout can be that negative consequence to something that's supposed to be a positive behavior.
Exactly. Now, I am very conscious of time. I'm sorry. I understand. So guys, if you're listening still and you're still with us, we will probably go over a little bit. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll go a few minutes over.
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah.
A few answers. So how do you feel your organization could improve work design for you? Some answers were having an external mentor, more team-based work to balance out workload, sharing barriers, blockages, boundaries, making work hours 9 to 5 instead of 8 to 5. Moments of recovery outside the designated tea breaks, which is what you were saying, that are welcomed and not seen as slacking off. So it's funny, like if you smoke, you're able to go outside and have a smoke break. But if you don't smoke, you don't get that break, do you? And it's weird. What else? We check in with our staff every 3 months. But as directors, we don't tend to reflect on our own health nearly as often. We tend to take a lot of the burden when things get hectic. And that's what I was saying before. It can come from both sides. So even though the leaders are encouraged and always to ask us, are we okay? How are we feeling? They're people too. We need to check in with them as well. We need to say, how are you going? Like, are you okay? What can we do to help you? Because you're running this ship. And if this ship's sinks, like, we're nothing without you guys. So yeah, just a few things.
Yeah, and again, some great themes there. And I think the leadership one's really interesting. We've seen in our Wellbeing Index and other research, burnout rates across the broader population, from what we've seen, is about 40%-ish as a general population. But then as we look at leaders, it's at 54%. So leaders are feeling it more than anyone. Because they're sort of that middle ground between trying to, hear that people are constantly tired and helping to make life better for them, and then having certain KPIs and measurements that they need to achieve from an organisational perspective. They've got their own stresses and worries and feel that they often have to help people with theirs. So again, they need a lot of love. We're getting a lot of interest in programs for the leadership. And the way we start those programs is always to focus on the leader so that they fit their mask first, so that they can then fit the mask of others, in the old plane analogy from there, that if they're in the best shape possible, they can then help others. And again, a lot of the time it's just coming down to those two really simple questions. How are you? How can I help? And if people can get to that point of having that as a regular dialogue within that workplace design, everything improves. The leader doesn't feel like they're holding on to the burden of trying to fix things all the time. And the individual feels like they're being heard, supported, and moderated through the challenge. And sometimes they don't necessarily need help. They just want to be heard or hugged in that scenario. So thank you for all those. Again, like I said, push through now in regards to the other areas where we look more at individual wellbeing. And so if we look at, I guess, the classic sympathetic nervous system response, our stress response. If we look at the physiological responses that happen within our body, things that we can feel or see, our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases, our pupils dilate, our breathing increases, we release cortisol and adrenaline, digestion slows. And if we're in that state for a prolonged period of time, as Nat said, there's a lot of negative connotations to that. But if we look at that state there, out of all those responses, which is the one that you have control over?
Breathing.
Breathing is the correct answer. Breathing is one of the few physiological responses that we do have control over. And again, that physiological and psychological highway, again, what we do physically can affect our psychology can affect our physical nature. So the change in breath can help switch us from that sympathetic nervous system to that parasympathetic nervous system. So again, it's not just having the break, but it's having the awareness to try and down-regulate your body back into that rest and recovery mode. And as little as 1 minute of deep breathing can really make a huge difference in terms of your performance and your ability there. And again, this is bearing in mind that we can't just give people these bits of information without adjusting workplace issues. That if there's cases of bullying and unrealistic workloads, and we're telling people to go and breathe deeply for a couple of minutes a day, it has the opposite of the desired effect. So that's why it's always a two-pronged approach. Give people individual skills that they can utilise, but also look at how do we adjust and improve workplace situations for people.
They're the people that don't have time to breathe. I don't have time to breathe. What are you talking about?
So a really simple breathing technique, box breathing. It's used in the military, it's used in corporate, it's used in sporting teams. It's inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. There's a book by James Nestor called Breath, The New Science to a Lost Art, that we have forgotten how to breathe. The key to it is long and slow breaths, deep breaths through the nose and not the mouth. I'll give you a couple of minutes now to do this activity by yourself of inhale, hold, exhale, hold, inhale, hold. I'll be back in just 2 seconds. Focus on your deep breathing, focus on breathing through your nose and not your abdomen.
I feel calmer already.
Perfect. How do you feel?
I'll never forget the very first time I had what I then found out was a panic attack. I thought I was having a stroke, and I walked across the road to the doctor, and I was like, I think I'm dying. I'm having a stroke. And they literally gave me a brown paper bag and told me this. And he left me in a room, and I did this, and I walked out and I went, turns out it wasn't a stroke. I just needed to breathe. And ever since then, I've implemented this technique, and it's life-changing. It seems so simple, but it's life-changing.
Yeah, perfect. I love hearing those, but I'm hearing a lot more people brushing themselves off, thinking they're having heart attacks, realising it is panic attacks in everything going on at the moment. So a good thing to think about here is not just thinking about the technique, but thinking about your cues or triggers in when you can use that in your day. Thinking about what is your cue? Is it when you make your tea, when you get your coffee, when you walk to the letterbox, whatever it is, think about that cue or trigger. And again, if I want to share a story about a person I know that used every time they went to the bathroom was the cue or trigger for them to focus on their breathing, probably better places than the bathroom there. I am going to have to wrap up today, but just to summarise everything we've gone through. Stress becomes toxic. Firstly, if we believe it's toxic, if we think it's a really bad thing and it's going to do us damage, it does harm us. It harms our performance, it harms our health, and it can become contagious, as Nat said as well. If everyone's talking about how stressed they feel and how stressed they are, it then creates that same outcome. If we lose control of the stress and we focus on all the things that are causing us stress that we have no control over, that then causes more stress and becomes toxic. And I think the big one is that relentlessness. That if we don't have those breaks and those divides and daily, weekly, monthly, in terms of taking time away from work to disconnect, to create that separation, that is where stress becomes toxic. Any questions in the comments? I will leave Nat to answer. I do have to shoot off. Thank you all for attending
Thank you so much,
today.
Greg. We will chat after this.
Perfect. And there is some resources there from our Wellbeing Index if you want to have a look at the results of that. Scan that QR code on your screen. The other one is to find out more about Connect Psych Services there. But thank you for your attendance and thank you for your involvement in today, and look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Thanks, everyone.
I will just continue on for just a quick second. I just want to thank everybody for joining today, and I will be emailing out these QR codes along with some links and some studies and other resources and white papers for you guys to all have a look over and just digest at your own leisure. And if there are any questions that you have for Natalie, for Greg, or for myself at Myosh, we are always around and happy to help. I'm sure they won't mind us getting in touch with them whenever you guys need, unless we're implementing our own work-life balances, then don't bother us. But other than that, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Natalie. I took so much on board from this. I was making notes. I'm like, refill my magnesium tablets and re-download my Simon Sinek book, because I too am a huge fan of him. I love him so much. And just go back to the whole, let's keep it simple and the basic communication and making sure we're constantly checking in on everybody and our colleagues. And I know our company is completely home-based. And so we're not even in a hybrid situation. So when your office is at home, it's so hard to find that delineation between work and life. And I often find myself falling asleep on the lounge with my laptop in my lap, but that's not because my team or my leaders have told me to do that. That's just me doing my work when I can. And it's so important to remember to stop, breathe, and find that work-life balance. Otherwise, the physical, the emotional, the mental symptoms will all join together and your body will force you to stop. You won't be able to stop. Your body will force you. And then what do you do?
It's so true. And I think that I'll finish on a note, like it says that what can we do, and work-life balance and work-life integration. It's an interesting word, isn't it? Because, as you just said, that we're passionate about what we do. And there's many people out there, they're incredibly passionate about what they do, because work forms part of our identity. That's what we can strive to do, but we don't want to be just living to work. We want to be working to live. And work has that component, but what else has that component there? And it is about that self-check-in as well. So you're right. And I'll leave you on something that I love to use with a lot of our clients, is that affect labeling. And, especially around when we feel really stressed, like rather than using the word stressed, what else are you feeling right now? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling disappointed? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling excited? What else? How can we extend our vocabulary around the words so we're just not focusing on I'm just stressed, because it has such a negative connotation, it's creating a negative behavior. When we can actually say I'm feeling overwhelmed, okay, we can then go, okay, let's have some self-compassion. That's okay. What can I do for myself right here, right now? But even being able to say it out loud or acknowledging that word and saying the word I feel, that is a labeling your emotion right there. And being able to create some verbal understanding around that actually reduces your adrenal response and opens up that blood flow again to the prefrontal cortex. So that's where you're going to have the problem solving. Well, how can I manage this? So it can all start again with those self-check-ins and checking in on others. Absolutely. But that's what we want to be doing. We want to breaking down the stigma, but let's check in with people authentically. Let's check in with people how we are feeling right now. And do we have that mental strength to be able to deal with what they might come back with and say, and do we have that space for them right here, right now? Not to become that counselor, but to become that guide to pushing them into the right support if they do need it. So there's those elements of checking in, checking in from a social connection, absolutely. Checking in when you feel that someone's really struggling. Check in on yourself first, then get ready to check in on them.
It's crazy. Within my close friendship group, we actually are all at a level where we will literally say, I honestly don't have the energy to give you an answer right now. Verbalize, rant, send me a voice memo, whatever you need, and I'll get back to you when I can. Just know that I'm not ignoring you. I just cannot give you anything right now. And being vulnerable enough and safe enough to be able to share that thought with people, and especially in a workplace, is huge. And I think it's something we definitely need to work on across the board, not only at workplaces, but with your partner, with your family, with your children, with your friends. It's just so important. And I think that is the perfect way to finish up today. Again, Natalie, I'm in awe. Love you guys so much. Thank you so much. For anybody that missed the recording or came in halfway or had to leave halfway, I will be emailing it out to everybody again with all the information. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of the week. Start implementing some of the stuff that you've learned here today, even if it's just starting with that breathing, and remembering when you are doing that breathing, that's a perfect opportunity to stop and think, hang on, how am I feeling? Like, take that as the next little add-on. So I don't know, obviously a lot of people have read the Atomic Habits. It's that little add-on to that habit. So doing that breathing will then prompt you to think, hang on, how am I feeling? And check in with yourself and then go from there. And I think it's just so important. And this has been one of my favorite webinars. So thank you so much again. And thank you everybody for hanging in there. I know we've run a little bit over time, but I appreciate you all and have a wonderful day.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. See you, Christina. Bye.